Hi everyone, Lee Pacchia here, and you are watching The Business of Law, where we talk about the challenges and the opportunities facing the legal profession. Mark Cohen joins us today. He's founder and CEO of Legal Mosaic. He joins us via Skype from Washington, D.C. Mark, good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you, Lee.
So you got me thinking about legal networks this week, and before we agreed to do this show, I kind of sat back and I thought to myself, I don't really know that much about legal networks. I mean, I know they exist. I've seen them bandied about in conversation, but I don't have a firm understanding of what exactly they are and how they operate. So let's start with the basics. What are legal networks?
Well, I would say, Lee, that first of all, you're in good company. A lot of people sort of know of them generally, but don't know much more than that. Let me break them down into two different categories. One that you would be more familiar with, and that would be a single branded network. Example would be Denton's, DLA, or the larger mega firms, Swiss Vereins. They are actually networks,
Really?
meaning
I never really thought of them as anything other than law firms or Swiss
right.
Vereins. I mean, but I guess that's kind of true.
And most people don't. And the reason why they would qualify as networks is because although they go under a single brand, they are multiple individual member firms, each of whom has its own P&L. So that would be type one of brand, the single branded network. Type one of network. The second and more widespread and frankly far more sort of unknown legal network are the 170 or so legal networks of law firms around the world who, if you were to aggregate them in terms of numbers of lawyers, you would have several hundred thousands of lawyers. You would have well over 1,000 law firms participating in networks. They are not single branded in terms of the way the law firms operate, although probably the best known legal network of multi-branded firms that you would know of would be Lex Mundi, which has about 170 participating member law firms, and in the aggregate has many billions of dollars of aggregated revenue. Not many people talk about market share in respect of the legal vertical, which I find kind of surprising since it is such a benchmark in virtually every other industry. But if you were to gauge market share in the aggregate of legal networks, they comprise about 25% of the entire global legal spend. So they are very significant in terms of their size, their number of participating lawyers who are in the network firms, as well as their aggregate revenues. Many, many times the size of the largest firms put together.
So how does governance and how do the numbers work? I mean, can you walk us through the functionality of a legal network a little bit?
Sure. Well, I think that's where things get a little murky because up until now, each network would have basically its own standards, its own ethos, and how it operates. Some networks, for example, are nothing more than clubs where firms join, and it's a kind of a very loose referral type of arrangement. Whereas some other networks do have more stringent quality standards, are more active in terms of co-branding the law firms with the network itself, and provide certain kinds of tools to network members, which would give them theoretically a competitive advantage, that they would be better served to be a member of the network than if they were to go it on their own.
Do they make money?
Networks do make money, absolutely. And I would argue that there is a potential for them to make a lot more money, particularly if they were to seize upon certain things. And we'll probably get into this, but there is a nascent association of networks that has just been formed that I think is going to start addressing a lot of what I would perceive as some of the deficiencies of the network, such that guys like you who are close followers of this vertical would be very well acquainted with them. And I suspect within a year's time you will be.
You wrote
soon.
about them in your Bloomberg BNA column. I think last week. The organization is called IFEN,
Yep,
AIFLN, and it's an association of international law firm networks. What
correct.
is it? How does it work? And why is it significant?
Sure. Well, Alphen is, as you point out, an association of independent law firm networks. Now, that's a mouthful. So let's start first with the association part. Um, it is going to be the so-called clearinghouse for all these, or many of these 170 or so networks that I adverted to in response to your earlier questions. There is, as we speak now, this is the first time that there has ever been an association of legal networks. And if you were to sort of think of it as what kind of equivalents are there out there in the marketplace, I would point to, for example, the Association of Corporate Counsel as an example of the role that Alphen is going to play for networks. That's the role that the ACC plays for in-house legal departments. So Alphen is already got a number of founder firms, that is networks themselves and their network members. And Alphen is basically going to work this way, as I understand it. Alphen is going to have several key objectives that they're going to deliver to networks. The first thing is, sort of in the rising tide lifts all boats. It is going to increase awareness of what networks are and how they might be very beneficial in today's legal marketplace. They're also going to establish best practices and standards for network members. So when you ask the question in terms of, sort of how do they operate and what kind of filtering process do they have and things like that, they're going to be addressing those sort of things and setting up standards. They're also going to provide their members with various benefits to memberships, including, for example, technology and also relationships with key elite vendors that will help member law firms with infrastructure as well as to be able to integrate the supply chain so that members in Alphen will be able to have a competitive advantage against the mega firms against whom previously it's been pretty tough for them to compete in terms of business.
So what's changed here? Why is there a market opportunity for this organization now?
That's a great question. And I think that is the key question in the discussion of networks. And the answer that I would offer is this. Not so long ago, as you well know, people talked about the AmLaw 200. Today, people don't talk about the AmLaw 200 because there are no longer 200 firms that really matter. You've got an elite group of firms, maybe 20 or so. People could argue whether it's 20 or 25. But you've got these elite firms, and for the other 180 or 175 or so in the AmLaw 200, they're really facing an existential crisis here. And a lot of people, as you've read recently, have been peeling off. And firms have basically taken one of two strategies. Either they're, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, sort of pursuing the too big to fail strategy, or they are, sort of imploding with a lot of their key branded partners peeling off into smaller firms that are trying to be more specialized and deliver fees at lower price points. I think it is in that backdrop that networks become very intriguing and very important because now there is an opportunity for smaller firms, to get together collectively and to very much help to take the place and to compete very successfully with large firms who previously completely dominated the market.
Yeah, I just wrote myself a note to stop saying AmLaw 200. That's going to take a couple of weeks for me to get used to, Mark, but thanks for putting me on notice.
Well, I'll tell you, Lee, it's going to be a lot harder for a lot of those managing partners to stop talking about the AmLaw 200.
Oh, for sure. Mark, really interesting stuff. Thanks for your time today. All the best.
Thanks a lot, Lee.
That's Mark Cohen, founder and CEO of Legal Mosaic. If you'd like to see more of the stuff we're working on, be sure to go check us out online. You can find us at mimesislaw.com. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I'm Lee Pacchia. Thanks for watching. See you next week. So Skadden won again for the 5th year in a row, but Jones Day made a race of it this year. Can you talk to us about the results for 2016?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a really dynamic year. This has been the 12-month period that has seen the most movement